This week on the program, we talk laser beams and photo finishes. How about all those commercials? And Rodney Childers stops by to talk about Darlington and other things. Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which isn't really live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally we have a special guest or two, when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, pull those belts tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Pace car is in. Green flag, green flag, green flag.
All right, welcome everybody. Another edition of Speed Talk Live. Glad to have you. Thanks for tuning in, watching or listening, clicking, doing whatever it is you do. We got a lot to go over this week. I'm Greg Engel. Welcome to the program. Here, as always, my favorite co-host, Owen Johnson, from across the big pond in England. Hello, Owen. How are you, my friend?
Hello, Greg. I'm great. How about you?
Good. I know you have finals this week, so it's been a pretty busy week for you. So I appreciate you taking the time. Of course, it's like 10 o'clock at night over there right now. So I know it's late too, but you're a youngster. You can take this. Come on. This is nothing.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk about the closest finish in NASCAR history Sunday. I'll tell you what, at first, when they had the delay, they had a delay of 3 hours for rain. By the way, the forecast going into it was like 10% chance. And we got delayed 3 hours by a rain shower. Go figure. And that doesn't usually happen. Usually the forecasters are pretty spot on, but they missed it Sunday, but we didn't start till 6 o'clock, almost 3 hours later, which was fine. It ran into prime time, so good for them. And like I mentioned, it was the closest finish in NASCAR history. It even surprised winner Kyle Larson.
Yeah, well, first off, we got lucky that a caution came out. I could tell my right front was beat up, and I was just trying to survive to get to the checkered flag. And then I seen Kyle, I think, blew a right rear, and was hoping that they were going to throw a caution so we could pit for some tires. And we left pit road in third, and I was happy with that because I wanted to choose second row inside, and was able to do that, and kind of had a plan from the whole time, or from before I chose the bottom, that I was going to try if I was close enough to split the leader to the middle, and then maybe you race it out from there, and it kind of mostly worked out the way I envisioned. I thought that I was hoping I could get next to Buescher down the backstretch, but he had a good run off of 2. I tucked in the hole that was there, hoping that Chase could get a run to push me, to get a run to get next to him before we got to 3, but that didn't happen. Made kind of a bad misjudgment, when you're going hard, and peeled off to the bottom of 3, and that was wrong, and then had to chase up, find some clean air, and thought I was done from that. We came to the white, and I figured, well, I'll just try and run up the racetrack here 1 and 2, maybe build a run, and my run was better than I was expecting, and he got kind of looking in the mirror, and he entered a little bit lower into 3, and I was able to have that momentum with some clean air to get to his right side, and I got pretty loose there in the center of 3 and 4 next to him, just kind of in an awkward arrow spot there, and figured I would smash the wall off of 4, but somehow it gripped up really good, and then we touched a little bit, I think, off of 4. I noticed that he was going to have the run back, so I hung a left and just tried to kill his momentum. I've seen so many times in NASCAR where if the guy's got to run, you can just door him, and it kind of stops it, and that's what happened. And I got to start finish line, had no clue if I won or not. Really didn't. I mean, I guess I cared, but really didn't honestly care, because I was just like, man, that was freaking awesome. And then I think I asked if I had won or not, or if I got him, and you said timing and scoring showed the 17. So I was like, cool. And then my spotter was going crazy shortly after that. So just incredible, but really just a great race from the green flag to the checkered flag. It was awesome.
So, as he mentioned, the winning move was taking those 2 tires instead of 4 when they had the late race pit stop, thanks to Kyle Busch spinning and setting up that green-white checkered finish. And actually, Cliff Daniels was asked if that two-tire stop was a Hail Mary in a way, because Martin Truex Jr., who had been a contender, took 4 tires. He started deeper in the field, I think just outside the top 10, might have been 10th or 11th. But somebody asked Cliff Daniels if it was a Hail Mary to take those 2 tires instead of 4.
Honestly, at that point, I knew that, well, A, it's a complete Hail Mary. B, I kind of knew that, it was going to be pretty dicey on the restart. And just the farther up in traffic you could be, you were going to have a better shot at it. We announced our call pretty early. And anyone, probably paying attention heard that it was a different call than what it was before. So I'm almost wondering if we didn't tip the hand of a lot with our call being different than codes that I had used throughout the day. So once I knew that 9 cars, total had taken rights, then, and we executed well, came out third, knew that we would have a shot. So your initial question, the first call was just a Hail Mary.
By the way, Truex did rally to finish 4th. I think if there would have been a couple more laps, those 4 tires would have paid off for him. But as it stood, it didn't. You know something? This whole race was amazing to me. Not just the finish, but the racing in between. We had 5 wide. Chris Buescher, who ended up second place and was a lot disappointed by that, made an amazing 5 wide move I had never seen, threaded the needle. That in and of itself was freaking insane. It was just, this is what the intent of the next gen car was, to race like it did on Sunday, and it certainly didn't disappoint. What are your thoughts, Owen?
I mean, I think you're definitely right about how the car ran really well. We didn't have any of the air complaints we had at Dover. It's been really compelling on 1.5 miles, but also there were strategy plays coming into the 3rd stage. Even if we hadn't gone to an overtime restart, which obviously put on an incredible finish, but even if we hadn't, we were gearing up for a great finish as Hamlin was being hunted down on older tires, fuel coming into play. So it was already a good strategy, compelling strategy race. And I thought a really good race overall, not just the finish, although obviously that's what we'll talk about for years to come.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this was, we still look back at the finish at Darlington between Ricky Craven and Kurt Busch all those years ago. Well, guess what? That's now been replaced by this. This is the one they're going to look at. And it was the second photo finish of the day, of the weekend. Saturday, obviously, was the Kentucky Derby, which also had a photo finish for the first time since 1949. And I grew up in that area, so the Kentucky Derby was a big deal when I was growing up. But that was the second photo finish of the weekend. And I like how Kyle Larson, after the race, did a little trolling. And I'm showing that Twitter picture right now, the X picture. Sorry, Elon, that Kyle posted. So yeah, it was a great race, start to finish. And the restarts, like you said, everything about that was great. Now, if we could just get the short track package fixed, this car would be incredible. And here's the thing. We're 12 races in, and we've still got a bunch of racing to go. So who knows what kind of memories and what kind of fantastic finishes we're going to have going forward. But we're going to take it a little different track right now, because
just rant and rave like you do to the TV during sport.
All right, let's rant. The rant this week, you'll notice we didn't talk about the finish and the controversy that people brought up on X. Right after the race, they were talking about the painted line wasn't straight. And I'm sure that was Chris Buescher fans, that the line wasn't painted straight, and it was, crooked. And how can you tell? What people don't understand
Their social media
is
team published that right after the race too. So
Yeah.
I think they were fanning the flames a little bit.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think they were looking for a little engagement. Well, they got it. They certainly got it, because people were definitely talking about it. But you know what? Kudos to Jeff Gluck. And if you don't follow Jeff Gluck and you're a NASCAR fan, I don't know why you don't follow him. He physically walked to the track after it was over, and he had talked to NASCAR officials. And I knew the answer to this before anybody else, learned about it that doesn't know it. But NASCAR said the focal point at the leading edge of the start-finish line cuts through any imperfections in an on-track line painting, which isn't laser measured by the grounds crew. and can include checkered flag designs, track names, sponsor logos, depending on the event. The physical start-finish line can also be altered by fans writing messages in areas during pre-race track access, and of course the Goodyear rubber from a field of stock cars crossing the line hundreds of times. The camera that they use, the high-speed camera, draws a line across that white area. So you'll have jagged edges on either side of that white area, but it's the camera that's on the other side of the track, other side of the pit wall, that uses a laser with a line, and that's what they use to measure the final distance. Now, I've seen these cameras. If you've ever gone to a NASCAR race, or next time you're seeing on TV, you'll see a designated area near the start-finish line in the pits where it's blocked off. And a lot of times there'll be a NASCAR official standing there, but it'll be blocked off, and you'll see a bunch of equipment and some antennas and different things. That's where this camera resides, and that's what they used. They showed the picture, the line clearly going and cut across there. And that's what they use. Okay. Now, there was other people saying it was grainy and blah, blah, blah. Well, to their credit, NASCAR showed a picture that happened when there was better lighting, and it pretty much wasn't any different. So it was a great race. The camera line is the final judge. It judged it that night, 0.001 thousandths of a second, and Kyle Larson was the winner. Now, you did bring up a good point too, Owen.
Yeah, so in the car, when we normally measure it, because cars aren't usually within a hundredth of a millionth of a second, however much it was, cars aren't normally in that range. So when we measure it normally, it's a transponder in the car. And so that's within that a small degree of error that it comes with it. So when the cars crossed the line, Buescher was scored the leader. That showed on the TV, that showed on our scanners that we have, that we can see the scoring monitors at the racetrack. That was immediately switched when NASCAR looked at the camera really quickly too. They did a very good job of getting that call made quickly. But obviously the data suggested initially that Buescher won, which calls into question to some fans the veracity of that camera. But the camera is very clear. That is what they go by. It's not based on the scoring chip in the car. That just makes it easier when you don't need the camera, because there's no need for a camera when the cars are seconds apart.
Yeah. When you but you know what? If we're going to have more close finishes like this, they're going to need it. And I think they did a good job putting it out there. The bottom line, this was a great race. It was a worthy winner. And Chris Buescher he was a gracious loser. So it had all the elements that'll make a memorable NASCAR race we're going to be talking about for a long, long time. By the way, there was also a question of what happens if it is a dead heat. And they've never had they've had one dead heat in NASCAR, but they figured it out, and Bill France got involved, and it was a whole big mess. But in a dead heat in NASCAR, according to the rules, it goes by who led the most laps, and then who led the second most laps, et cetera, and they use it, and they'll find a winner. So if we get a dead heat, and you know what, it wouldn't shock me. After some of the stuff we've seen this year, it would not shock me if we had a dead heat. But there was an ARCA race in 1971 at the Clark County Fairgrounds that was judged to be a dead heat by officials. Of course, not 1971, they didn't have the same kind of technology that we do today, so they were relying on what that was. So officials judged it as a dead heat, and Tom Boucher and Iggy Katona, love that name, that's a great racing name, was credited with a win. So, hey, it was great. I loved it. Now we want to move on because there's something else we want to talk about, and it's something that's on your mind. Now, preface this by saying I'm not a huge paint scheme fan. I'm like a driver. I don't see, the paint scheme on the inside of the car, but I know it's important to fans. And one of the things about going to Darlington is the throwback paint schemes that they use. And I know you have some thoughts on that, Owen.
Yeah, I'm a little underwhelmed, I think, with the throwbacks this year. So there's some really great designs from Hendrick, solid from Spire. RFK has some for the 6 has a good design, but there's a lot of cars that aren't doing a throwback. The entire Penske team, for instance, isn't doing one at all. And I get that their sponsors have the last word on what's on the car. This business is driven by sponsors. But if there's that many cars not running throwbacks, then I think there's clear evidence that a lot of the sponsors don't want to. And I think that's a problem on NASCAR's end. This race needs to be marketed better to make it something sponsors actually want to participate in, because fans are talking about it, because the schemes get advertising time and there's some payoff. Whereas for a company like Shell on the 22 or Menards on the 12 who aren't running throwbacks, there's no motivation to do it when you're just going to run your normal car that gets the same fan attention as any other race. I think NASCAR needs to be upping the advertising. These cars need to be appearing to as many fans, as many even non-NASCAR fans as possible, get people talking.
I'll throw this out there. I wonder if this throwback weekend is outliving its usefulness, because it's been around for a while. When it first came out, now and you may not remember this, but Darlington at one point was on its last breath. They took away one of the races. They took away the Southern 500, which I thought that was going to cause a revolt. They took away the Southern 500 and they put the Darlington on Mother's Day. So we used to big deal, and you bring all the mothers of the drivers out and blah, 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 thinking that it's just going to kind of die on the vine. Well, they got some money. They did some refurbishments, but the most important thing they did to that track was put lights. They put it under the lights. Darlington at night, ladies and gentlemen, is the most incredible, visceral, visual experience you'll ever have in your life. This thing, more than any other track I've ever been to, shines at night like you would not believe it. And that's what helped bring this back. So when that rise in popularity, they got their Labor Day weekend date back. They've got their second date back. And at first, the throwback weekend was on Labor Day. It's a holiday. It made perfect sense then. But now they've moved it to the spring, and I just think maybe it's outlived its usefulness. And I think the fact that you don't have as many throwback paint schemes this year is a telling sign of that. Maybe if we moved it next year to the Labor Day weekend, maybe that'll help. But now the point there is when this track was on its dying breath, I think that throwback weekend, in combination with adding the lights and doing the minor upgrades they did around the facility, brought that track back to life. It's an important part of the schedule now. I look forward to going there. I look forward to racing there now twice a year. So, good for them. But again, I think maybe the throwback weekend, as we get into more of a regular cadence, so to speak, maybe the throwback weekend needs to be reexamined, and maybe we need to do something else with it. So to your point, that may be why a lot of the sponsors don't like these throwback schemes and aren't jumping on board.
Oh, no worries. No, I think I completely, I'll cut there. No, I completely agree with you. I think that's a really good point. And I think, if the sponsors aren't jumping on board, there's no reason to keep it going and have a mismatch of some throwback cars, some normal schemes, because it's just going to let more and more sponsors be less inclined to throwback at all.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to having a throwback weekend. But I think maybe if you're going to do it on Labor Day, build up, have the holiday, and different things like that. Okay, there was something else we forgot to talk about from the Kansas race, because one of the things because it was a great race and there was a lot going on, but a lot of people didn't see it if you were watching on TV. Because why? Fox, every 10 laps was going to a commercial. And I'm not talking about the side-by-side junk, which is better than nothing, but they were going to commercial every 10 laps. Now, look, kids, I get it. You got to pay the bills. But NASCAR is unlike any other professional sport, motor racing in general. If you go to a hockey game, they have a TV timeout. If you go to a football game, they're in between, offense and defense splitting off. Baseball, you've got innings. Between innings, you've got opportunities to put commercials. You really don't have that in a race other than the stage breaks. You really don't have and even in the stage breaks, I would argue there's pit stops and a whole bunch of other stuff going on. So you don't really have that. So I get it. It's kind of a challenge. Now, flip that on the other side of the coin. F1 raced in Miami this weekend, and Verstappen didn't win, which was a big deal. But the thing with the F1, that was probably the biggest deal the whole weekend. But the bigger deal with F1 to me is it's flag to flag, no commercials, no breaks, and the commentators have a chance to not only talk about what's going on up front, but talk about those people deeper in the field and make that part of it exciting. you don't have to just focus on the leaders because you don't have to worry about going to commercial. You don't have to worry about the less, actual on air time you've got. So they did that with F1. And let me tell you something. I used to work in TV, so I understand some of the mechanics behind it and some of the things of what that goes on behind the scenes. But you know what? You're really running out of excuses when you start talking about, well, they can do different things on cable. This F1 race was on ABC broadcast over the air. If you had an antenna, you could pick this race up and watch it. There was no commercials. The only time you knew there was a sponsor involved was there was a little Mercedes symbol up in the corner. Now, I would love for NASCAR to start talking about that. Some of the arguments were Liberty Media pays for all the production and they handle the camera work and all that. Okay, great. NASCAR has got this fancy new digital media center there in Concord, North Carolina. They're going to be doing some of this with the Xfinity races where they're going to handle the production. They're going to handle the cameras. Let's try it on the CW next year when we bring the Xfinity series over. Or even this year, we're going to do some of them on the CW this year. I think it's a worthy idea to find a sponsor to write a big enough check to have their logo stuck up in the corner of a screen and cover a race flag to flag. And I challenge NASCAR to do that and see what happens. Now, the numbers, 3.1 million watched F1 over the air, 2.3 million watched NASCAR. Now, it was on FS1. It wasn't over the air. It was also rain delay, but it was still down from last year, despite the fact that it was a race that'll be talked about for years. There's people talking about, they'll be disappointed they missed it because it was just that good of a race, and we're talking about it even today. So the numbers, the TV numbers really didn't call it, but every 10 laps, and sometimes sooner, where we're stuck with these commercials when stuff's going on the track. And I would say NASCAR, Fox, NBC, CW, Amazon Prime, step up to the plate and give us a race without commercials. That being said, I'm also wondering how Amazon Prime is going to handle this next year, because maybe they're going to go commercial free because it is going to be streaming. You're going to have Amazon Prime. And when I first heard about this years ago, and we started talking about streaming, I thought, oh my God, the sky is going to fall and blah. But now, you know what? Everybody's got Amazon Prime or going to have streaming. So I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. Kind of looking forward to it, especially now that we know that Earnhardt Jr. is going to be part of that broadcast team. He announced that this week. We all kind of knew it, but he announced that this week. He's going to be going to the TNT coverage and the Amazon Prime coverage. It'll be good to see him back on TV. So I hope he's enjoyed his year off this year, although he's still got his own race team to run. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm looking forward to that in the CW, but we need to get rid of the commercials. But you had another point to make about the F1 race.
Well, yeah, I think just firstly, just to talk about the F1 race in general, like you said, it might be the only thing that could overshadow NASCAR having the closest finish in history is Lando Norris finally getting that first win. Not just Verstappen losing, but for Norris getting McLaren that win after heartbreak in Russia 2021, 3 years ago, when he nearly got a win, but decided not to pit for rain tires and spun out from the lead. But I think it's worth noting there's a couple of differences with F1. The biggest one, I think NASCAR races are just longer. F1 races are generally about 90 minutes and they can't go over 2 hours. So know you're not going to have as much time without commercials, whereas NASCAR, you're getting 3. Go to Charlotte, you make it a 4-hour race. Additionally, I think American F1 fans are really fortunate in the sense that F1 is primarily, to the rest of the world, is not on cable. It's not over the air. It's paid. And so there's F1 TV Pro, which is a very expensive subscription, even in the US, to get access to it off of the TV. And all the channels to watch it over here in England are paid channels. So it does get the payment through a couple of other sources, similar to maybe Amazon Prime, that NASCAR doesn't. So I would love to see NASCAR go commercial free, but until I think they get a couple more routes of payment and maybe even shorter races too, I don't think it's that likely.
Yeah, and F1 is far bigger in Europe, in England, as you know, than NASCAR. So yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we got to look at the time factor. There's a lot of different things in play, but I think we need to start that conversation. I think they need to look at it. I think they need to find ways. I think now if they had a service, if they had the regular broadcast with commercials and everything, but they had an offer where you could stream it without commercials, and pay a small fee. I mean, a lot of people might be willing to do that. It's something that we got to look at. It's the future. It's just like we don't get newspapers anymore. The future's here. And we need to start looking at different things. And like I said, just a few years ago, if you would have told me they're going to stream an entire NASCAR race online, I would have told you you're crazy. And then, my God, I'm not going to, you kids get off my lawn. I'm never going to watch NASCAR again. But now it's so, it's such a common thing, for us to turn on our Netflix or our Amazon Prime. So, hell yeah, I'll binge watch some NASCAR. We'll do that. So, other news, Michael McDowell. I don't know. I didn't have this on my bingo card. Michael McDowell made a shocking departure from Front Row Motorsports. I thought they were doing great. And they've been improving. I talked to him earlier this year. We had him on this program talking about the next gen car, which was fantastic. And he's got his 2 wins with Front Row Motorsports. He got 2 poles this year. Obviously, one of those was the Daytona 500. In 2023, he made the playoffs the last 2 out of the last 3 years. Career best 15th in the final driver standings last year for him. So I knew the way his message came out today, it was kind of cryptic, but you knew that it wasn't Front Row Motorsports getting rid of him. It was him stepping away from Front Row Motorsports, and you had your head scratching why. There's no big seats coming open. I mean, I know Trackhouse, Daniel Suarez is in a contract year over there. Could have been that, but I think Daniel Suarez is going to get signed. I think he's pretty confident he's going to get signed too. And then here comes the Spire Motorsports announcement. They're going to have Michael McDowell in the car with Corey LaJoie and Carson Hocevar next year, which is going to be great. I think it's a step up for him and the team. The car that he's going to be racing full time next year has been split between Zane Smith and a couple other drivers, and so it's it's going to
Zane full time this year.
Yeah, Zane Smith. Yeah, so they have that. So the question becomes, where's Zane going? But I think Zane's a young guy. He's got such a career ahead of him, and I think Michael is 39. So I think it's a good move. It's the right move for them. So I don't know about you, but like I said, what do you think about when you saw that? Because again, I didn't have it on my bingo card.
No, I didn't predict it at all. I feel like McDowell has kind of grown around that team. I just talked to him about at Martinsville, and he was talking about how proud he is to serve as a mentor to Gilliland and how great Gilliland has been running in the 38 this year, which he has been. That team has been really on the rise. I'm not sure I see Spire as an upgrade. Obviously, they've been running really well this year with the 77. The 7's been running okay. The 71 with Zane Smith is really not. So what's interesting there is Zane has Trackhouse support. So that's a Spire Trackhouse entry with some sort of mix between the two. So I wonder if Zane's going to end up at Trackhouse. But those two came in. Zane Smith, Carson Hocevar both came in from the Truck Series. Zane as a former champion, Carson Hocevar not. And Carson has really outperformed in the 77. And I think that's probably part of it. Zane we're 10 races into the season, but Zane really has not lived up to the expectation of a Truck Series champion in that car. So it might be a Trackhouse move. It might be a Spire move. I'm interested to see where Zane ends up, honestly.
Yeah, and it's going to also tell the tale of how that car actually runs when we put McDowell in it next year. Obviously, McDowell's talented, so let's see how that works out. It'll be an interesting story to follow next year as we get there. Another thing I heard this week was the charter at Stewart-Haas Racing. They may be, or the charters. Let me talk about the charters overall first, because we're close to a deal, it sounds like. And it's really kind of strange, because among the things that they're now talking about is the France family wanting a provision in there where they can buy into a race team. Now, on the surface, that sounds kind of bizarre. And it also makes me think, well, if they're talking about that now, then they must be pretty dang close to getting these charters done. So I think the charters are going to get done, but we'll see. And I know, if I remember, the France family has got some things going on in one of their race series that they own. If correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, IMSA. They have the Action Express Racing Cadillac in the GTP class in IMSA, which was running close to the front in the 24 hours. Did not end up winning, but it was a contender. And I've been seeing some things about IMSA. I don't know anything in stone, but it seems like the Cadillac program might be shaking up a little bit. They might be one of the only Cadillac entrants going into next year. So that's going to be interesting to see how they remain in IMSA. But if they have interest in NASCAR, that would be, I mean, well, we talked about Penske. We talked about Penske last week. That would be an
Yeah.
interesting conflict of interest potentially.
Yeah. We'll see. That's what seems, on the surface sounds so bizarre, but hey, maybe if they give that opportunity, somebody may stomp on it. And speaking of stomping on charters, hearing that Stewart-Haas Racing may be shopping one or more of their charters around, which means they'll go down to a 2-car team, or they may have a full-time team that just has to depend on running fast enough to make the race every week. Doesn't surprise me. When Kevin left, they lost some high dollar sponsorship. Bush left, obviously, Hunt Brothers Pizza, which was huge with them. So I can see that is a possibility. On one hand, you hate to see it, but they've been making incremental improvements this year. Noah's been running fantastic. Josh Berry, not so much, but I think he's getting better each and every week. But as they make those incremental changes and start to get a little better, it may help them to get rid of some of that extra weight. And I don't want to say dead weight, because you certainly, people like Ryan Preece are a very talented driver. But you have to remember that Stewart-Haas started just with 2 cars. So for them to get back down to 2 cars wouldn't surprise me, but we don't know. That's just talk, and that they're going to be shopping their charters around. Maybe Spire will pick an extra one up. Who knows about that? So you mentioned Penske. Penske
Yes.
this week made some big moves. He suspended a couple race engineers. He also suspended his chief strategist, Tim Cindric, who's been with the team since the 90s, Austin Cindric's dad, suspended them for 2 races. Not just any 2 races, but one of those races is the Indianapolis 500, which Roger Penske dearly wants to win again at the racetrack he owns. So it was shocking in the fact that he's not going to have his engineer, his top Newgarden's not going to have his top strategist there for the Indy 500, but I think it just goes to show the measure that Roger Penske's going to own up to what happened with the team, and I think it's going a long way towards restoring his reputation.
Yeah, I don't think he had much choice there. I think a lot of the other team owners were discussing how unhappy they were with Penske owning cars in a series that were cheating and got a win through cheating. So I think it was something he had to do, but I do respect the move. Getting rid of Tim Cindric, who's not just a strategist, the president of Penske Racing. He won't be at the Indy 500 at all. Although the one question I think is, obviously you have these strategists. How much does a suspension really mean? When we suspend a crew chief in NASCAR, they can still make the calls. I wonder how much they're actually going to be suspended internally. Will they be making calls at the Indy 500 just from the shop? But regardless, it's a good sign that Penske is taking things really seriously, is not going to give his own team preferential treatment. Now he's got to work on the TV ratings and getting IndyCar better, but at least there's no rampant cheating from the team owner or the series
So all
owner.
that's TBD. We'll see. I mean, I know they got a race center like all the race teams, so maybe they'll be. I don't know. We'll see. I thought it was the best move he could make given the circumstances. So we talked about the throwback weekend. I love it. I think it's great. Eric Jones is going to be back after his injury, so he's going to be back in the 43 this weekend. And speaking of throwbacks and the throwback schemes, Rodney Childers has a special scheme this weekend. They unveiled it at the State House, and I actually talked to him, and he was very excited to see that. He didn't know it was happening until he pulled the cover off and saw it. So it's really cool. So I talked to Rodney Childers about setting up a car for Darlington, and also about teams pushing the envelope when it comes to the rules in NASCAR. I want to ask you a couple questions here real quick. Looking forward to Darlington, how do you set up a car for such a track as Darlington? Because, I mean, both ends are different, right? And I mean, you go to 1.5 miles and you can kind of throw things that turns 1 and 2 can kind of be the same as 3 and 4, but you go to Darlington, it's a vastly different end on either end. How do you set a car up to deal with that kind of a track?
Yeah, like you said, it's always been a tough place. Over the last 20 years that I've been going, the surface has changed a lot. I know the early days it would just eat the tires off like crazy. I mean, it still does, but just not like it did back then. And then we went through the repave stage of Mark Martin won on two tires there, and Regan Smith won by staying out and all those different things. And then now there's no way you would stay out. So, um, it's difficult. Normally you're too tight turning back down the hill in turn two. That's normally the thing that hurts you the most. It just kills your run down the back straightaway, and then you end up too loose off of four. And you just kind of figure out what works for you. I think with this next gen car, you probably have 10 good cars there, and all 10 of them have a different setup in them, but it works for that particular driver. And we were able to hone in on that with Kevin driving the car. And I thought we had a pretty good car there in the spring. It wasn't great, but it was definitely a top 8 car. And then we went back in the fall and kept inching our way forward. And like y'all remember, we were getting ready to take the lead from the 45 when all hell broke loose. So um, it'd be interesting to go back there with Josh. He was able to drive the 48 there last year and got some laps. I know it wasn't a great race for him, but to have some laps there in these cars is important. Um, and honestly, just kind of see where we're at in practice and try to qualify well, try to get a good pit stall, and do all the things that we need to do.
And talk about pushing the envelope a little bit. Obviously, as long as you've been in this sport, the next gen car gives you the smallest envelope you have to push within, right? But if you go to the edge and NASCAR catches you in inspection, you're sent to the rear of the field. There's all these kind of stuff going on, and you don't want that in a points race. But when you look forward to the All-Star race, there's nothing on there but money and prestige, right? There's no points involved. Do you think about pushing the envelope a little bit more when you go there, knowing that if you get caught, so to speak, that the sanctions aren't going to be as rough as they are on a points weekend?
I mean, honestly, to me, I don't think there's such thing as pushing the envelope anymore. To me, I don't even get into that anymore. I don't even like if there's something wrong with the car, I don't know there's something wrong with it. It's just not what it once was 10 years ago. Um, Now it's kind of a little bit like a factory, the way that the cars are built. They're 4 or 5 weeks out, and our Sonoma car is already on the floor, our Charlotte car is on the floor, our Gateway car is on the floor. That's just the way it is right now. And it's really up to us to sit here and look at these computer screens and figure out what springs to put in it, what shocks, what sway bars, what heights we're going to run, what you can get by with air pressure. You still, try to get all you can through the Hawkeye and through the LIS and all those things, but it's not what it was with the old car where you had something new every single week and completely just change things around and all that kind of stuff. So and I think that's why it's the racing's the way it is. It's really hard to pass because we're all about the same. But we've got to continue to get a little bit better. We've been really strong at some of the short tracks. The intermediate tracks, we've actually been better than what we've shown. Josh has done a good job in qualifying. It doesn't really look like it, but if you were sitting at the toolbox on pit road and watching his SMT, there's not many guys that can go out there their first year and run wide open through a corner at Vegas and Texas and all those places. And I was standing on pit road before the race this past weekend and looking around at who was around us, and that was something to be proud of. So it was going to be a good night the other night. I should have put 2 tires on and maybe had a little better shot, but I was thinking that we might have multiple green white checkers and have a shot at the top 5 with 4 tires. So it's the All-Star race. I think the key with it is really going to be getting your car to handle right, and a guy that likes a place like that. And I think we're fortunate from that standpoint. Josh was in the 48 there last year. He won the Open, was able to move on to the All-Star race, got some laps in that. We were already up there for the Cars Tour tests, and we're going to run the Cars Tour race next Wednesday night. Those are the type of places he's in love with, he's comfortable with, and hopefully we can just show up and be fast. And, I don't think pushing envelopes there is really going to make your car faster or slower. It's really about, just going out there and have the thing turn and have it where you can put the throttle down and the brakes are good and all those things. So that's really going to be the key up there.
Thanks, pal. I appreciate it. Have fun this weekend. I'll see you at the All-Star race.
Thanks, man.
So I thought the envelope question was pushing the envelope was a surprising answer to me, because I'm not saying that no team is trying anything, but the fact that they're kind of locked in and finding speed however they can without pushing the rules is, it probably makes Smokey Unick roll over in his grave somewhere, but I get it. And the parity's there. And, with Michael McDowell, we had talked to him and his performance was improving because of the parity. And you know what? I don't want you to change any kind of formula, whatever the hell you got going on. As this year we've had so far with the closest finish in NASCAR history, the finish at Atlanta, the stuff we've got going on in the racing in the field, don't change a damn thing. And if you tell them they're not going to push the envelope, then by God, don't push the envelope. So got the throwback weekend. I'm talking about it's a little old, but you know what? It's here. And it's not, it's going to happen, whether I think it's worn out or not. I love Darlington. I talked about that. There's not a lot of fancies of amenities there. There's no neon garage, but you know what? Who cares? When you go to Darlington, the town embraces it. The fans love it. The track is great, a little rough on the edges, but you know what? That's part of the charm and part of the allure. And my pick for this weekend is Ross Chastain. Although I think it'd be a great story if Eric Jones could pull it off again. Who you got for this weekend, Owen?
Well, I'll say this. I was looking up panic buttons on Amazon, seeing how cheap those would be, because I was thinking we've got to pull the panic button for Ford if they can't pull off a win at Kansas. And you know what? They didn't. But they came just about as close as you physically can, 0.0001 seconds away from it, or however much it was. So I don't think there's any reason to press the panic button now. And I think there's going to be a Ford in victory lane. I think Buescher's going. Obviously, he wants a win. He very nearly got one this weekend. I think the 17 is probably, Blaney's better in points, but I think the 17 has had some really good performances of late, and I think the 17 of all the Fords has the momentum, and I think it's going to be a Ford in victory lane.
Well, there you go. All right, I got Ross Chastain. He's got Chris Buescher. Who you got? Comment down below or not, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions or just to tell us how bad our production is or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out and let's go racing.
All right, there's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.